And these ads and the education that you get from other financial advisors oftentimes does not address some of the really important issues you need to be aware of. If you wait, maybe your pension would have grown a little bit more. If you had waited, maybe your investment portfolio would have grown. And make sure you have enough cash on hand, whether that's 2 or 3 years of literal cash. I'd like to retire early. For everybody, that definition of early is a little bit different, but what I say to them is, be careful of what you wish for, because if you're not properly prepared, you can really enter the dark side for an early retirement. And in this video, I want to share with you what some of those elements are and how to avoid them. But before we get there, subscribe to my channel. I have over 30 years of experience in the retirement planning field. Hit the notification bell to be alerted when we post new videos so I can get you the information you need so you can pursue your retirement. So I've said this over and over again. I think our industry's done a lousy job of educating you, particularly for those who are looking to retire early. What you continue to see on the ads are, a couple sitting out on their porch or on the beach in the rocking chairs, and everything's just wonderful. It doesn't always happen that way. And these ads and the education that you get from other financial advisors oftentimes does not address some of the really important issues you need to be aware of so you can feel confident that you can retire early. And I want to make a point here. It's not about just the money. I know people who have lots of money who are not happy in retirement. And I know a bunch of people who don't have a lot of money and are very happy and fulfilled in retirement. And I spoke about this in a recent video called The Difference Between Rich and Poor. Take a look at it. So I'm going to bring you inside some of the conversations I have with my clients. And there are 6 items that I want to share with you right now. And as usual, I'm going to save the biggest one for last. So stay tuned. All of them are important. But there's one conversation that we have with our clients that I think really does deal with what happens when you retire early. So the first item that you have to understand is how to replace the business culture. Let me share with you a story so you understand this a little better, okay? Jean was a client of mine. She was about 55 or 56 years old, and she wanted to know if she could retire. And she came into the office and we did the planning and put together her retirement roadmap. She'd been working for the organization for 36 years. You do the math. It was her only job, right? And when we did the numbers, the roadmap indicated that with the assumptions that we put in, that she could retire from a financial perspective. She could pursue her goals. So we made another appointment about 2 or 3 weeks later, and Jean comes in and she sits in my office and she starts looking at me, and tears are now coming down her face. I'm going, what's going on, Jean? And what she says to me is the following, okay? Follow this. That business has been my second home, said Jean. I know I have a reason to get up in the morning, a place to go to, a place to contribute, a place to be respected, a place to deal with all of my friends and colleagues, and all of that I will lose when I go to retire. There will be no more structure. And she was concerned about the fact she would no longer get the fulfillment that she got while working once she retired. And she chose to wait another couple of years before she retired. It's not just about the finances. And these are the conversations that we have with our clients that you need to be having with your advisor. If they're not talking to you about this, you need to bring it up or get to somebody who's dealing with this in the retirement planning space, and have conversations with your spouse or partner as well. It's important to visualize what will happen in retirement and to understand that going to work is more than just the paycheck. The second item that you have to realize is, actuarial tables tell us that we're living longer. Therefore, if you retire early, 55, 50, and the actuarial tables, and we do planning for our clients and pretty much have them living till 90 or 92. So now your money has to last you 35, 40 years, or in essence, the extent of the time that you had actually been working. So it really puts a burden on making sure that you're accumulating and accelerating that investment nest egg so that it can potentially provide you with the income you're going to need over that length of time. If you have not done the planning, and this is why the retirement roadmap that we do is so important for our clients. If you don't do that planning and you retire early on a wing and a prayer, hoping everything's going to work out, you really are putting things at risk. And it's a real risk when you do retire early without understanding the numbers. And if you really want to know if you're prepared for retirement, go to our banner and hit the quiz button. It's a 2-minute investment in yourself that will provide you with some clarity. Once you fill out the quiz, about 15 questions, I will immediately get to you and score for you which of the 3 preparedness stages you are in for retirement. I'll get you a free chapter of my book, Don't Outlive Your Money in Retirement, along with a couple of worksheets, which will also open your eyes in terms of what you need to be thinking about in terms of retirement. As I mentioned, I think the big one I'm going to save for the 6th one, but I'm going to get to it very quickly, okay? So the third item is the whole concept of spending, okay? So the books traditionally tell us that we need 70 to 80% of the amount of money that we needed while we were working in retirement. But the reality is, what I have found in the experience I have with my clients, is that in their early portion of their retirement, first 3, 5, maybe even 10 years, depending upon how their health is, that they may be spending more money in retirement during that time frame than they did while they were working. They're going to visit the grandkids. They're going to go travel. They're going to do things. They're going to buy. They're going to maybe even purchase some of the things they had waited for until they retired. So when doing your planning, you need to take this into account. The other side of this is that the industry doesn't tell you. It's so important that in retirement, if you are at some level relying on income from your portfolio for your spending and the markets go down, it is a double whammy. It's not just that the markets went down, they also went down at a level even more so because you're taking money from the portfolio, and becomes even more difficult to get back to square, to get whole again. So be very careful in the planning. This is why when we talk to our clients, we assume the first couple of years are going to be in the negative for the markets, that they're going to face some adversity right off the bat, because we want to see how that plays out relative to their desire to pursue their income spending needs for the rest of their lives. The 4th item is penalties. If you are retiring in your early 50s, let's say, in order to get money out of your 401k or retirement plans or IRAs, you're going to be facing penalties for taking that money out if you need money from the portfolio, and it's the only place to get it from. Now, there is one obscure rule in the IRS code called Section 72T. It allows you to take money out in the way that they are telling you to. And if you do that, then you can avoid the 10% early withdrawal penalty. It's a very complex rule and you need to do it exactly right, but it is a way around the penalties if you are retiring early. The fifth item is health insurance. Most people don't take into account the fact they need to continue to have the health insurance and how expensive it's going to be until age 65 when you are eligible for Medicare. It could, the COBRA is expensive. It could cost upwards of, I've seen it with my clients, $2,000, $2,200 per month, even without the kids around. So you need to, in the planning, make sure that you account for this potential increase in this line item. It's an important line item to take care of. And finally, the big one, right? The final point is, and the number one fear outside of outliving your money is, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? You've spent all of this time working. If you do not have structure, if you do not have things to do, places to go, people to see, it may not be a fulfilling period or chapter in your life. Now, I do have a client who all he wants to do is sit on the beach 24/7. For him, that works. But I do have another couple clients, and when I ask them in anticipation of their retirement, they're actually older, but I was asking them, what was their number one fear as they were looking towards retirement? And he said the sentence, what am I going to do with my time? He says, I can only play, 3 rounds of golf a week. What do I do with the rest of my time? And her answer was, when I turned to her, was, I don't know what I'm going to do with him. I know I married you for better or for worse, but not for lunch. So it's really important to figure out in advance, have conversations with your spouse, identify how that time is going to be structured, how you're going to live your lives independently of each other and together. This is a big one, and this will go a long way to making sure that you can have a fulfilled retirement. Forget the money. We all want to, right here, feel like we're doing all we can and getting rewarded, getting fulfilled, and enjoying the journey. I want to share with you how to think about things properly so you can retire at the right time. But before we get there, subscribe to our channel. Hit the notifications bell so you're alerted to when we post new videos. So New York Life published a study, and they interviewed people who had over $100,000 of investable assets. And the results were that 46% of those who had retired said they would have retired on average 4 years earlier if they had had the same financial level of security 4 years prior that they do now. It's a big stipulation, right? Because there are a number of considerations that we have to think about. And it's all in the planning, all right? If you wait a few more years, your Social Security would grow if you had deferred it. If you wait, maybe your pension would have grown a little bit more. If you had waited, maybe your investment portfolio would have grown a little more and you wouldn't have withdrawn any income from it. So there are a lot of different moving parts, but that's just the financial side of things. There's also the personal side of things, which is a huge consideration. I've said this over and over again. I think this pandemic that we've gone through, and hopefully are near the end, has provided for many a glimpse of what retirement might look like. And what I mean by that is you didn't have a workplace to go to. You may have been virtually at home, but you had no place to go to, no way to get out of the house. And you're sitting there 24/7, oftentimes with your spouse or your partner. For some, that worked out very well. For some, maybe not so much. For some, it meant that they really enjoyed this way of working and were delaying their retirement. For others, they recognized that maybe it was time and they needed to move on to the next chapter of life, and they moved up their retirement date. But we have to take all of this into consideration. Let me share with you a story. It was a number of years ago, it could have even been 20, 25 years ago, that I was asked to write what they called a money makeover for the Boston Herald. And so my role as their guest author for this article was to interview a couple and to take a look at their finances and their goals and their desires to find out how they might change things to better put them on track per their own objectives. So this woman who had been working for this organization for a number of years was about 4 or 5 years away from retirement. But the one thing that she kept saying to me was she really hated working there. She didn't enjoy it anymore. But the reason why she was still working there was because she wanted to maximize her pension. And to her, the goal was to get that 100% pension. Therefore, she had to wait another 4 years or so. And then at that point, she could officially retire. So the question really became, what if she retired earlier and we changed the definition, her perspective around a little bit more, to assume that what her goal was to enjoy life, not have to maybe toil at this workplace, but still be able to pursue her financial goals. And as it turned out, when we went through all of the numbers and did the planning and put in place her retirement roadmap, that the very good news was she could, based on her goals and her assumptions, retire right now. And she did. And it was a grand celebration. She realized that the goal wasn't to maximize her pension. The goal was really to maximize her joy of the journey, but not give up on the finances. So if we could somehow align the two, and we recalibrated in her mind what was important, the exercise was a true success. And within a month, she had retired from that job. It's a great story. So the question for you really is, are you prepared for retirement? It's so many different levels. In my 4th book that I just released, Don't Outlive Your Money in Retirement, we addressed this. We addressed the pandemic. We addressed all the financial and holistic issues. And if you want to, and one of the things we did as a result of the book was put together a quiz that you can find in the banner of our channel. It's a quick 2-minute quiz. Fill it out. We'll score for you all of the answers. It's only 15 questions, I think. 2 minutes. Tell you which of the 3 stages of retirement preparedness you are in. I'll also get you a free chapter of the book and a couple of worksheets to give you a little more clarity about how close you are to whatever your goals are, so you're properly prepared for this next chapter in life. So what I want to do now is to share with you some really good reasons to move forward on retirement and some really bad reasons that I've seen and that we need to address. And the first bad reason, truly, to retire is when I hear somebody say, I can't take this job anymore. Now, I understand that, But if the finances aren't in alignment with what you want, and you may not have lined up a new way to replace that income, just to walk away, depending upon what age and what your level of finances is, may be a very big mistake that you may not be able to overcome. So even though the joy of the journey isn't so much at the workplace, maybe you can figure out how to make some adjustments there so that you can get to the point where you're financially okay to retire. The second comment, and it's similar to that, is I'm bored with my job. Well, maybe you can find other ways in life to create some more stimulus, some more excitement, some more emotion. Maybe you can come up with something in the workplace or volunteer to do something that will help to complement or increase your joy of the journey and not be so bored. Because one of the things that we find once you do retire is that the unsuccessful retirement is due to the fact that people become bored then as a result of not having enough to do and to fill the time, a real fear that I talk about over and over again on this channel. So don't let boredom push you to a bad decision when it comes to retirement. Another line that I've heard, and studies have shown that some people retire as a result of this, is because my parents retired at this age. Well, their goals, life expectancies, cash flow needs, journey, expectations may have been very different than those of ours. We're expected to be living longer. We may be spending more cash as a result. We may need more money as a result of living longer. So be careful that you don't want to just sort of have an emotional attachment, have a parallel decision process as your parents did. And then finally, here's a big one, okay? Don't make this mistake. Your friends are retiring. Well, I don't know if they're retiring and they're making a good decision or a bad decision. How well off they are financially. Sometimes you never can tell the book by the cover, right? It may be that they may have to pay the piper 10, 12, 15 years down the road after retiring and realizing that they should have worked a few more years. But what they do shouldn't impact how you decide or when you decide to retire. Be very, very careful about that one. I've seen that more than a couple of times. It's not always a good thing to do. So let's talk about 3 good reasons to retire. The first is becoming more and more commonplace. I need to take care of someone in my household, a parent, a child. That's a good reason to retire. And we may have to actually sort of put the finances on the back burner for a while because personally, we feel we need to step up and take on that role and help out that family member so that we can help them get to a better place. That is a good reason to retire. The second reason is health. What we found in a study recently was upwards of 50% of people who were retiring early were retiring as a result of a health situation. And here it's really important to understand something, particularly when it comes to Social Security, okay? This is one of the few times where you may be better off to take the delay on the Social Security all the way to age 70, okay? If you qualify for it, you may be better off to take the disability benefit made available to you earlier than your full retirement age, okay? Could get it as early as 60 usually. Take that benefit, let yours defer all the way up to age 70, and then have it move over at that point in time. So if it is a health reason that's causing you to retire early, then that's what we have to do. But the best reason of all would be if you actually put together a plan, a retirement roadmap. You took into account your cash flow need, reducing taxes, which of the 567 different Social Security claiming strategies you should take, how much risk you should take on the portfolio, all of this, the 7-step process that we've put together for our clients so they can see exactly what track they are on, what decisions might be made, playing what-if scenarios all along the way. If I do this, what happens? If I do this, what's the impact? That's what planning is all about. And then add to that, layer on that, the conversation about the personal side of things, the holistic side of things, the volunteer, the family, the travel, all of that. Put it all into one place, the retirement roadmap. There are 5 critical issues you need to be attending to as you approach retirement. Many people do not attend to all of these and may be putting their retirement in jeopardy. In this video, I'm going to share with you what you need to address as you approach that 2-year mark until you move into this next chapter of life. Before we get there though, do subscribe to our channel, hit the notification below so you're alerted to when we post new videos. So in my new book, Don't Outlive Your Money in Retirement, we chronicled the 7-step process that we take our clients through. And I wanted to condense that a little bit for you for this video so that you can walk away with a sense of what you need to do, what you need to prepare for before you make that irrevocable decision to move on into retirement. So the very first item you need to make sure you deal with is cash, because cash is king in retirement. It's not what your net worth is or how many buildings you own or what your investments are. It's how much you can generate, because it's that income flow that truly does give you the flexibility to pursue the retirement that you wish. I find the most successful definition of retirement is I can do what I want when I want to. Don't we all want to be in that position? So you really need to make sure that you have enough cash on hand. And that really is important as you cross over, if you make that bridge from working into retirement. Now, you remember back in 2007, 2008, when the markets cratered. And also going back to the late 90s when we had the tech bubble burst and we had 3 successive markets years, 2000, 2001, 2002, where the markets were in red territory. If one had retired just before or during that time frame and didn't have enough cash on hand in order to sustain the lifestyle that they needed, then not only were their portfolios going down because markets were going down, but they were also dipping into that portfolio to generate the income they needed, something our industry does not do a good job of telling you what that impact is. It's not good when you just go to retire. It's the most vulnerable time you have for your portfolio, just when or just soon after you retire. So minimize that vulnerability, minimize that risk, and make sure you have enough cash on hand, whether that's 2 or 3 years of literal cash in the bank or emergency reserves, or within your portfolio, particularly if it's in either a taxable or a retirement account, setting aside a basket, a bucket, we call it sometimes, of enough cash so you can draw down from that part of the portfolio without having to dip into your investments at a time potentially when the markets are going down. That could be very difficult to overcome, as many found out back in the last recession, 2007, 2008, or back in the early 2000s. It's very, very difficult to overcome retirement, a down market, drawing out income all at the same time. So have enough cash on hand. So the second most important item is understanding how much risk you need to take with your investments. And as we walk through the 7-step process. Unfortunately, our industry focuses so much on the investments that you do as well. But when you go to retire, shouldn't be focusing primarily on the money management. First thing as you transition into retirement is understanding what your cash flow need is, because understanding what that need is will help to define what risk you should be taking now that you're retiring. When you were working, it was okay to take on more risk. We had more time to overcome mistakes, and we all make them, okay? But now that we go through retirement, we need to think about it a little bit differently. Instead of looking to outperform the traditional indexes while we were working, the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, now what you need to be doing and understanding, most importantly, is what is your personalized investment benchmark. You're no longer looking to outperform what the markets did. You're looking to take on the least amount of risk necessary in order to generate the income you need and potentially preserve your principal. And that's where the personalized investment benchmark comes into play. You now have to align your money management with what your retirement goals are. And I can tell you for a majority of our clients, their need to take on the amount of risk is lower than what the need they felt they could take on when they were managing their money while they were working. They no longer want to put their principal as at risk as they did before. Again, timing, vulnerability, and then the income issue. So make sure that you're establishing your own personalized investment benchmark. Second, within this category is looking at potentially reallocating your portfolio as you're within a couple of years of retirement. So let's just say you did the planning and you've hit your number, whatever investments you need to generate the income you desire in this next chapter. And let me share with you a story. Many years ago, when I first got into this business, I was working with a client who was working at Wang. Now, there's a name from the past, right? So when we were talking, he was at the time, he was about 6 to 9 months from retirement. He'd hit his retirement number, but close to 90% of his 401k was in the Wang stock. A lot of people back in those days were doing that. And I said to him, listen, you've hit your number. You don't need to be taking on that kind of risk, but it was a risk that he felt comfortable with because he worked for the company. He thought because he worked for them and they had taken care of him and the stock had done so well up until this point that they'd continue to take care of him. I don't care what company you're with, having too many eggs in one basket is not a recipe for a confident way to retire. And of course, you know the end of the story. Soon after he retired, the Wang stock dropped. He lost a majority of his portfolio and could no longer pursue the retirement he was looking for. You may be in and have benefited from the growth side of the domestic equity business, the technology. You may have done very well over the past 3, 5, 10 years. But you need to start to take a look at how to manage that a little bit differently once you do the planning and realize that you've gotten to the point where you've got your retirement nest egg. So the real question is, are you truly prepared for what's going to happen in a couple of years, right? So as a result of the book, we put together a quiz. You can find it up in our banner. It's a quick 2-minute quiz. We'll score it for you, get you back which stage of the retirement preparedness you are in. We'll get you the first chapter of my book and a couple of worksheets that will help to give you a little bit more clarity. So make sure you fill out that quiz. So let's go to the third element that's really important, a very important consideration as you move into retirement, when it's important to replace the income that you had been getting while you were working. And oftentimes we look to the portfolio to generate that income. And you need to understand proper perspective from a planning perspective, okay? Studies show over and over and over again, many, many years, these numbers have been reaffirmed, and they're usually just a little bit above or a little bit below this number. But the industry standard is basically you can take upwards of 4% of your portfolio over a long period of time with a portfolio that's properly allocated so that you can generate the income you wish and protect and preserve that principal. Certainly no guarantees for any future performance. But I bring this up because I had a conversation with someone who came into my office a while ago. He was with Fidelity at the time, and he was generating somewhere around a 7 or 8% total return on his portfolio. And I said to him, how are you going to generate that income that you're going to need? And he says, well, I'm going to take it from my Fidelity accounts. I'm going to take 7%. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who think this way, that whatever the portfolio is generating, not just the yield or the income, but in total, they're going to take, but they don't understand the long-term impact of that. Also, let's assume we have done well over the past 5, 7, 10 years in this tremendous bull market that we were having before the pandemic. But even so, we're back up to historic levels, right? It doesn't continue this way, folks. Those numbers probably aren't going to replicate themselves, that we'll have another 10 years of great returns. Again, no guarantees, but you have to think about it in this way as you do the planning. And that's how we think about the 7-step process. We're very conservative in the way we think about it. If we overshoot what the assumptions were, that's great. But if we underwhelm and don't return what we need based on the assumptions in the planning, you will be in a position to potentially be depleting your assets a lot sooner than you wish. The fourth big item that most people truly don't understand, and again, I don't think our industry's done a very good job of this. Matter of fact, I know it. There's 567 different Social Security claiming strategies. Do you know which one to take? Do you know how to provide for your spouse today and tomorrow? If you're single versus being married, do you know the difference in how to think about when you should take that strategy and claim it? Do you know, with regards to the health situations for either you or your spouse, how that will impact the proper decision about how to coordinate spousal benefits so you don't leave upwards of $200,000 on the table, which many studies show that you can do? A United Income study a couple of years ago indicated that upwards of 96% of people take their Social Security at the wrong time. Don't be one of these people. This is why we focus so heavily and provide 7 different calculators, and there are calculators on the Social Security site as well. You need to understand this. Don't just take it early because you can. Understand the impact for you now, for both of you later, and the surviving spouse later on. And then finally, one of the biggest mistakes, mistake number 5, is not understanding that you may have all this time to fill when you go to retire. Again, I talked to you about the best definition of retirement, doing what I want when I want to. Another is, I don't know how I had enough time to go to work before. Great definition of retirement. I'm playing golf, I'm volunteering, taking care of the grandkids, I'm traveling, taking care of the house, whatever it is. My days are full. I'm fulfilled. I'm enjoying this next chapter. Because one of the things that you don't realize when you retire is you lose what is called the business culture. It's not the paycheck, it's the whole culture. It's a reason to get up in the morning, a place to go to, a place to talk to colleagues, have a community, be respected, to contribute, to see things grow, to be a part of a bigger community again. You lose all that when you do go to retire. So make sure you have that conversation. Very important role we play with our clients to prompt them to have that conversation, so they understand before they get into retirement what it's going to look like, what the roles are and definitions and the boundaries and space, and whether I, with my wife, we're going to live independently, have our own things going on, This is a huge issue. The gray divorce is a big number these days. Make sure when you go into this next chapter, you understand what the landscape is, both financially and personally, and that will help you to get a fulfilling and rewarding retirement. And if you really want to learn more about the full 7-step process, take a look at our playlist. Thanks for watching.